And here's your moment of metal.
Hey, this is Rick and Lyle, and today we are going to be talking about celebrities that are also metalheads. We figured with all the craziness going on right now in the world, kind of do something fun, keep it, positive and upbeat, and let's talk about a bunch of celebrities are also really into heavy metal music and why they listen to it and what they've kind of maybe contributed to the heavy metal world. So I'm going to start today. We got a bunch of people we do want to talk about. This one kind of goes back a little ways. This was a cool story that I had actually heard. So Steve-O, who is from Jackass, if you don't know, has been around a long time, and a big metalhead. So he always had this great story of when he was 12 years old. He grew up in Toronto, and he was 12 years old at the time and found out that Motley Crue was coming to Toronto, and young kid, 12 years old, a huge Motley Crue fan at that time, probably still is, and was just super excited to find out Motley Crue, his favorite band, was coming to town. So he literally called every hotel in Toronto to try and find out where they were staying. And his friends are like, "Oh, you're just being a stupid kid. You're not going to find Motley Crue in this huge city. Stop. They're not, no one's going to, you're not going to find out what hotel they're staying at." So he didn't give up. He kept trying, and I don't know how long it took him, but he according to him, he called pretty much every hotel he could think of, and eventually he gets a hold of Motley Crue's their manager's brother. He gets him on the phone somehow, and he tells his story, and he outpours his heart on why he's this huge Motley Crue fan. Ends up getting tickets to the show, and ends up meeting the manager's brother. I guess was the one that got him the tickets. Ends up meeting him to get the tickets, and then once he comes face to face with this guy, he just dives even more into it. So goes to the show and then gets invited backstage and gets to meet the entire band backstage. 12-year-old kid, his idols at the time, and just a really cool story about Steve-O. He's a really cool dude. Everyone knows a lot of drugs and all the crazy stuff that he did during Jackass. He's perfectly clean and sober now for a very, very long time. He does stand-up tours where he talks about stories that, during Jackass and his drug use and all that. He's a really cool dude. And also, he's through all of this, has become best friends with Tommy Lee and Nikki Sixx from Motley Crue. So I always thought that was a really cool, story about just, a certain celebrity that's a metalhead that didn't give up and met his idols at the time.
Yeah, that's cool. I think one of my first, celebrity, someone who really is into metal would be, back in the early 90s, Arsenio Hall. He had a talk show. I think it was late night. It was really cool. And he had Jim Carrey on one time from In Living Color. This is before he became a big movie star. I think Ace Ventura was about to come out. And he was on the show talking about what he was up to. But he also talked about being big time into death metal, which was a huge shock for me. Because this is early 90s. This is when death metal started to rise up. It's not like now you say death metal. Even people that aren't really into music or metal, they've heard that term, that genre. This is back then when this was the groundbreaking. And I remember watching that, and immediately he had my attention. Oh my God, this guy's talking about death metal. And he talked about Cannibal Corpse, Napalm Death. He even did I think an imitation of Barney from Napalm. He did the whole guttural vocal thing. It was crazy, but that was my first time, damn, here's a guy, a celebrity guy, telling everybody yeah, I'm a metalhead. I love that, it was very cool.
Yeah, that's funny too, because I remember when that happened, you probably had turned me even onto that, and we were laughing because Jim Carrey being Jim Carrey, just completely nuts. And he did do that, making fun of Barney from Napalm, and he was just the singer sounds like this, and he's and he just made it funny, but it was a lot of truth behind it at the same time, where it was that's a little exaggerated, but that's Jim Carrey just describing it, but yeah, just funny stuff, and definitely a huge metalhead for sure.
And of course, everybody knows Ace Ventura, the movie. He had Cannibal Corpse play in the movie. I think they do Hammer Smash Face. I think
when he's chasing. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Yeah.
When he's chasing the bad guy through the show, the concert, and I've heard Alex, the bass player for Cannibal, saying when they showed up to do that scene, because it's movies, it's not really live. They have to just kind of go through the motions. and he said they were kind of doing their song, but he said I guess they were kind of playing along to the song, but because it was so low, it wasn't really loud. They could actually hear the stomping of all the feet of the people, They were supposed to be losing their minds during, it's movies. So, you know how movies are.
Right.
But he remembers that, Alex said when, Jim Carrey asked them like, hey, will you be in my movie? At first they thought, are they going to be made to look like a joke? That was a concern with them, because of course.
Yeah, they're like, is this for real? Or you're just going to fuck with us.
Right.
Make us look stupid.
And then once they met Jim, they knew he was for real. He was, a big metalhead, loved death metal. And then, of course, they agreed like, hell yeah, we'll do your movie.
Yeah. And anyone, and most people have probably seen that movie and know about it. But what was even funnier about that scene was like, of course, Jim Carrey's this huge fucking metalhead. Probably at that time nobody probably knew that because like you just said, he had just got done. Well, Living Color was probably still on, but who knows, what kind of music this guy's in. So speaking of Ace Ventura, I think okay, this movie comes out and it's and he's got Cannibal Corpse, and they're like, okay, it was just something they probably did for the movie, not knowing that Jim Carrey's this huge metalhead, and it was done on purpose, and one of his favorite, metal bands. And what was funny about that scene as well is he's walking through the crowd, and I remember the song's playing, it's just ripping. I'm pretty sure it was Hammer Smash Face. And he's walking through, and he's just like the music, the music's just super heavy and brutal, and he's walking through the club, and he's got this like little silly, Jim Carrey dance as he's walking through. It's not even head banging or like something like a mosh pit type thing. He's just walking through with this little silly walk, just kind of grooving to the music. It's kind of made it even funnier, and made the scene even that much better. Like, he's just, having a good time and just being Jim Carrey. So that was always a classic scene where a very popular death metal band was involved in a really big movie. So good stuff. Speaking of, that movie also just reminded me of when Anthrax was on Married with Children, which was a great, and we're going way back, but, the band Anthrax, they were on an episode of Married with Children, which was a class. And I remember even seeing the commercial when Married with Children was on the air at that time and seeing, this, whatever night, I don't know what night Married with Children was on, but say, this Sunday on the, Married with Children, Anthrax was going to be on. And we're like, what? Anthrax is going to be on Married with Children? Holy shit. And it was just classic. It was a big goof. They had fun doing it. It was like this big party at the, at the house and all that. And so, yeah, that was another, thing where the entire band was on an episode of Married with Children.
I think, adding to that, just me and you being huge fans of underground metal. And at the time it's hard for people to know this, especially younger people. Not knocking it. I love young people that are into metal and shit and discovering all these bands that happened a long time ago. But back then, yeah, if, like what Rick said, Anthrax on Married with Children, that was just like anybody who was a metalhead was like, what?
Yeah,
Anthrax on Married? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that stuff didn't happen.
It didn't happen. You just, when a band, an extreme band, I think, yeah, even, what the fuck's the name of that show? Hard Copy, right? Yeah. Remember when Hard Copy did that fucking death metal episode?
Yeah, I mean, vaguely.
It's called Hard Copy,
yeah, but
right?
Yeah, there was a show called Hard Copy that was on for a while, yeah.
Yeah, it was, this is back early 90s. Death metal's just starting to rise up. I was at my friend Paul's house at the time. I think he recorded it. Well, he had to, this is back of VCRs, and there's no DVR yet. You had to do it with a tape. A tape.
It took work to record shit back then.
Yeah, you had to, be ready. Sometimes this shit would pop up on you.
Yeah,
when you didn't expect it, and you better have a blank tape ready.
Yeah.
Stick it in the VCR and record.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, Hard Copy. It was a kind of controversial, kind of like a news show back in the day. But they had an episode on death metal. They interviewed David Vincent of Morbid Angel. They talked to Richard Brumnell of Morbid Angel, Chris Barnes of Cannibal. It was just, really, it's just unique, back in the day, for to be in such underground music that nobody knows anything about at the time. And then, you see it on TV. You're like, holy shit, that's on TV? Cannibal Corpse? They're actually mentioning the band's name.
Yeah, especially with stuff like that. At that time, like you said, too, there was no, it wasn't so easily accessible like it is now with just the way we have, technology and smartphones and the internet so easily accessible, and with all that, and, you can find anything on a dime and, record anything by the press of a button. Back then it was a little more work and a little more involved. And like you said, you had to kind of be ready. So for sure, but it was cool to see stuff like that back then for sure. But it was always definitely a treat.
Of course, getting back on celebrities that are really, are metalheads that people might not know about. Lady Gaga, I think I've heard her say, Iron Maiden, the first time she saw Maiden was life-changing for her. Just blew her away and kind of pushed her to even this is back before she rose up to who she is now. Of course, she's huge. She's, giant. But, these are people like you would never think. There's no way this person listens to heavy metal, but Lady Gaga's one of them. Huge Kiss fan. I've seen pictures of her backstage wearing Paul Stanley's boots and.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I also saw a picture. She's a huge Anthrax fan, and I follow Charlie Benante on social media, and, they've been, Anthrax has been touring for a very long time on their last album. So she's been at a few shows. She hasn't just been to one show. She's been to numerous Anthrax shows. That's how big of a fan she is. Their tour has kind of gone on for so long on this last album that they made, and that she's gone to multiple shows. But she's apparently, she must be friends with Charlie Benante, the drummer of Anthrax, and she's taken plenty of pictures with him, with his kids backstage. And she's at a ton of shows. And then, most people probably realize, I don't know why, I don't know if it was an award. I think it was an award show that Lady Gaga actually performed with Metallica, where they had a compilation where they did a Metallica song called Moth to Flame. And she sang with James. I don't know, dude. Was that the Grammys or some shit? Or I don't remember what it was. I'm pretty sure it was it wasn't an award show because it was a live performance.
Yeah, I think it was the Grammys, and James' mic was off. You could not hear him.
Yeah, he got
If
pissed
you
about
watch
that.
the original video, I think even Lady Gaga noticed it and started running over and sharing her mic with James. She realized his mic's not on. Huge thing. Who's the idiot who didn't turn his mic on?
Yeah, somebody, definitely fucked that. And and you could see James pissed. But yeah, I remember there, if you watch the video, or if you can, I don't know if it's been edited or changed, or if that was even corrected during the live performance. But yeah, there are plenty of video where you could see them both sharing a mic, basically face to face singing the song, because they were supposed to, do it in their own way, with her doing it with the band. But yeah, that was a whole thing. But yeah, she's definitely a big metalhead. So another one that always comes to mind to me is Norman Reedus. And most of if you watch The Walking Dead, Norman Reedus is Daryl on The Walking Dead. He's a huge metalhead. He actually plays bass. I don't know if he's in a band or not. He might be, not that I know of. He might have his own thing going on outside of the show that The Walking Dead that he's on. But anyway, I don't know a lot of bands that he's really into, but I know he's really good friends with Scott Ian from Anthrax. Speaking of Anthrax once again, and he's actually such good friends that he's gone to shows with, gone to Anthrax shows, and they've actually brought him up on stage, and he's actually played bass, with Anthrax on stage, just because they're such good friends, and they hang out before and after the shows. They hang, they drink and just have a good time. And, he's been friends with those guys, I guess, for a while. So it's kind of cool to see him just playing music with them. And, he seems like a really cool guy. So that, that he's another, a big metalhead who's a, pretty big celebrity. So, it's all, good stuff.
Yeah. Nicolas Cage. Yeah. He's a big, he loves classic metal, and he has a son, Weston, 21 years old. And he's the lead singer in a black metal group called Eyes of Noctum. I hope I'm saying that right.
Yeah, I think that's how you say it. I've seen the name of the band. I don't know much about them. I know they're a black metal band. I know his son and him himself are both big black metal, fans, or fans of black metal. And I actually looked it up too. That and it's probably, I don't know, which way or another, But, Nicolas, like you said, his son being in a black metal band, right? And they had said that it was confirmed by his son that Nicolas Cage is a huge Dark Throne and Satyricon fan.
Nice.
Yeah. So Nicolas Cage is definitely liking the black metal genre, which is always cool. And Nicolas Cage seems like a pretty cool guy. I've actually met him one time. Didn't really get to, chat with him a whole lot. It was work involved and all that, but shook his hand and met him, and other people met him while he was staying at a hotel that I work at, and everybody was like, yeah, man, he's a really just mellow, cool dude. I know he's had some news stories that were a little out of control with his drinking and partying, but we'll leave that as may. But everyone was like, no, man, he's really cool and friendly and sociable and all that. He'll talk to you, and he's a metalhead too. So there you go. It's the whole package.
Just shows you, metalheads aren't like, it's not a look. And of course, they're, the classic metalhead looks, long hair, metal shirt, black clothing. But yeah, there's a lot of people out there that are metal. Yeah, that you wouldn't even, think that were, Margot Robbie's one, of course, who did Harley Quinn and Suicide Squad. I think she's a big Slipknot fan. She's been to Slipknot. She says, whether you're a Slipknot fan or not, live, Slipknot is really something to see. It's big impact on her. And
yeah, I know. I kind of saw that too, and I never knew she was a metalhead until I kind of just dove into it a little bit. Yeah, and like they said, she's not super hardcore, but whatever. Everybody likes every genre that they like. Metal's metal. We're all a family. It's a metal family, and it's in your blood. And she's into Slipknot. There's another band called Bullet for My Valentine. Don't know a whole lot about those guys. Know the name, but she's a big fan of those guys as well. But it's, she's still listening, to the metal, and she still enjoyed it. And another fun story, which I heard on Bill Burr. So Bill Burr, if you don't know who Bill Burr is, you don't know comedy. So Bill Burr is probably one of the most famous comedians right now in the world. But Bill Burr likes to play drums, big metalhead. He is a drummer. He's actually very good. He's actually done some shows with other celebrity type people, other comedians who play instruments, and they've done little shows here and there where and like I said, he's played with musicians, just charity type things and fun stuff like that. But he does play drums, and he is very good at playing the drums. But he's been a metalhead since he was a teenager. Bill Burr's in his 40s. And he's been a metalhead pretty much his whole life. And a very funny story, not so much, funny, but true. And it shows you how amazing metal is. He one time was turned on to the band Meshuggah. And I don't know if he had never heard of Meshuggah. Maybe he knew kind of who they were, but wasn't really familiar with their music. So he ends up going to a Meshuggah concert. And Meshuggah has a song called Bleed, which is one of their most popular songs. And it's an amazing song, and the drumming on that song, not just that song, Meshuggah in general, their drummer is just incredible. But the drumming on the song Bleed is it's just a constant battery of drumming, and it's incredible. And he tells a story on his podcast of going to this concert and loving, the show. And then they come to the song Bleed, and he was just completely blown away by the drumming. He was just like, wow. He's like, he goes, I can't tell you the last time I went to a concert and saw a band that I wasn't really familiar with and was that blown away by the talents and what I just experienced. He's like, that was just a complete drumming clinic. Him playing drums, could appreciate it even more so. So that was another fun story of, just another celebrity, just, Bill Burr, amazing comedian, funny as hell. And, he's a big metalhead, and he grew up, pretty much like the most of us that are in their 40s, grew up listening to Metallica and Slayer, Megadeth, Anthrax, all those bands, AC/DC, Guns N' Roses, Iron Maiden, all of it. He's a fan of all that stuff. So he's definitely another one that, top celebrity on the list who's a big metalhead and definitely knows, a lot about it.
No, Christopher Lee, big actor, Hammer horror films. Everybody knows Christopher Lee. He played Dracula in a lot of, horror of Dracula, a lot of the movies back then, the 50s movies, the Hammer horror films. Also, yeah, huge into heavy music when Black Sabbath came on the scene. Huge Sabbath fan. I think he met Tony Iommi one time and said, you're the father of metal, and Tony told him like, well, you started it. You know, this,
Nice,
you know,
yeah.
even the name Black Sabbath came from a horror film, Black Sabbath, I think.
Right.
I don't know who was in it. I don't know if Christopher Lee was in it or it might have been Bela Lugosi. I'm not 100%, but that's where Sabbath got the name from, a horror film. But yeah, Christopher Lee, you know, Mr. Dracula, alongside with Bela Lugosi, big metal fan.
Yeah, and I had read somewhere too that there was some line from like a Manowar song, like a lyric that he had actually, it was in a movie he did or something like that. I didn't really look too much into it, but it was something I just had come across. But now as you bring him up, I remember, you know, reading about that he used some like, you know, lyric in a Manowar song that was like relevant or was actually a line in a movie that he was in.
Might have been like a spoken word part in the song.
Yeah, I think it might have been something like that, but just, yeah, same thing though. And it was funny, like when his name popped up, it even came up like Sir Christopher Lee. Yeah. So moving on. And this is one you can relate to, because I'm pretty sure I don't know if you were with me at the show. I mean, like, okay, you know, so Penn Jillette, who is from Penn and Teller, we saw him at maybe more than one. I know one time we were at the House of Blues and we went to see Slayer, and the Slayer show got over and everybody's walking through the Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas where the House of Blues is, and the show's over, and just like a typical Slayer show, which is sold out, of course, like always, huge crowd leaving, everyone's yelling and freaking out in the casino, walking out, Slayer, you know, the whole thing. And I don't know, I just remember looking behind me. I don't know if somebody said, hey, look, or what. And I just kind of, you know, looked to my left behind me, and there's Penn Jillette from Penn and Teller walking out of the Slayer show with a Slayer shirt on. And you can't miss the guy because he's like, you know, 6 something. You know, he's a big dude. He's tall. He's got some size to him. And we look over, and I had heard in the past that Penn Jillette was a metalhead. And, you know, that basically confirmed it when I look over and like, oh, there's Penn Jillette walking out of the Slayer show. So that was like, right on, man. Yeah, I don't know if you were with me during that show. I don't know who I was with.
There. I would have remembered that.
Yeah, he wasn't that far behind us. I mean, I was kind of looking over, and he was about, you know, 5 or 6 people back, you know, to our left, and there he was, just, you know, and just as fired up as everybody else was leaving a Slayer show, because that's what happens, because Slayer never has a bad show, as we already know. So that was always good.
No, I can't think. I know I've been to a lot of metal shows. I don't know if I've seen like too many actual celebrities there. Like, oh shit, look who's there. You know, look who's here at this show. Like,
yeah, I can't either. Actually,
I don't think I've ever. You know, well, Penn, you got Penn, so
yeah, that was just kind of walking. Yeah, I didn't see him inside the show, but it you know, obviously it does happen, but the crowds are so big sometimes. But yeah, I've never actually seen celebrities, but you know, it does happen quite a bit.
Plus, like, probably because they're celebrities, they'll get, you know, hounded.
Yeah.
While they're at the show. So I think a lot of time probably bands like, you know, have them sit up, you know, on the stage on the side and watch the show from the side so they can enjoy the show without people hounding them, wanting a picture, an autograph.
Right.
So I'm sure a lot of times, like, celebrities probably, like, when bands find out, oh, they like us, hey, put them up.
Right.
Get them a backstage pass so they can watch the show from the side. And
yeah, and as you probably know too, yeah, and there was a cool picture too. This was a while back. Speaking of, but you know, kind of like musicians liking other musicians. There's a really cool picture that was on Ghost's last tour where James Hetfield's a huge Ghost fan, and there was a picture of him at a Ghost show, and he was kind of in the back. It was an outdoor show. Remember that? 'Cause you could see the sunlight was out and all that, and then he was kind of a little ways back from the stage. But he was just back there, just hanging out, watching Ghost. But just, you know, somebody had taken a picture of it though, like, oh look, Hetfield's at the Ghost show. And he's like, yeah, he's a big fan. You know, of course he's there. So that, you know, that was kind of cool.
I guess you can kind of look at a band like Metallica, as big as they are. I guess those guys kind of are celebrities. Yeah. I mean, they can't go nowhere, just like a celebrity. They can't go nowhere without being mobbed. People bugging them, you know, wanting an autograph, a picture, wanting to talk to them. So I guess you can kind of look at bands like, like a Metallica or an Iron Maiden. You know, bands like that are kind of celebrity status because they're just so huge and known in the world, you know, so. Right.
And, you know, and there's sometimes too that sometimes, you know, those musicians, not everybody may know what they look like, but they know the band's name, even if you don't listen to metal. I got so many friends at work or so many friends in general that aren't metalheads, but they know who these bands are. So they can just completely relate. They might not be able to tell, give you band member names or tell you what they look like, but you say the band's name and they know who they are just because they've been around for so long and they've accomplished what they've accomplished. So yeah. Another good one that we came across was Stephen King. Stephen King, if you don't know, is a writer. He's written many, many, many horror novels. That have actually been turned into movies, most of them. But Stephen King's a writer, and he is a really, really big metal fan as well. Kind of a weird guy, but he seems cool, and he's been noted to being a big fan of Motorhead, Black Sabbath, Slayer, Metallica, and Anthrax as well. I'm pretty sure that him and Scott Ian have become friends. I don't know how long they've kind of, known each other, but Anthrax's third album, Among the Living, the title track itself was an idea that came from Stephen King's book, The Stand. And I've never read The Stand. I know it's about as thick as a phone book. It's a very long book, but I heard it's amazing. If you've ever read it or take the time to read it, I heard it's great. Apparently, it's got a lot to do with a man-made virus, and Anthrax kind of took that idea from the book and made the song. There's a song Among the Living that's on the album Among the Living, but the song itself, I think, contributes to the subject matter of Stephen King's book, The Stand, which was, like I said, about a man-made virus, and kind of takes it from there. But same thing. But Stephen King, the writer, also a big metalhead. So another one that I've actually came across, which I didn't know, some of these I did know without really having to think about it, or some popped up that we've talked about previously that were celebrities that I knew were metalheads. One that was kind of funny the way it was worded was Prince Harry. Apparently Prince Harry's a big metalhead, and there was kind of a joke going around where it was like, oh, how did the Devil's music get past the Queen's guards? And it turned out that there was a friend of Prince Harry's that confirmed that on Prince Harry's iPod, the Big Four is definitely on there: Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, Anthrax, among other bands. But apparently Prince Harry's a huge metalhead as well. So that's one that I didn't know of. I was like, all right, right on. That's good to know. Okay, so apparently Cameron Diaz is a big metalhead. She obviously grew up listening, well, not obviously, but apparently I should say, she grew up listening to Iron Maiden, Whitesnake, Ozzy, bands of that nature. I'm not sure how old Cameron Diaz is at this point or what year she was born. But she's definitely grew up listening to those types of bands, and they kind of made a joke where there's like, oh yeah, Cameron Diaz, she's a metalhead and and she was in The Mask with Jim Carrey, so he probably turned her on to a whole bunch of other metal. Jim Carrey being a more hardcore metal and more of a death metal fan. So it was like a joke made that, they made that movie together, The Mask. So Jim Carrey probably turned her on to, some heavier death metal and got her even more into metal, which I don't know if she is or not, but it was, kind of a joke. But she definitely, knows her metal. So that was another one that was a little surprising. But it's nice to see that some of these famous people that you wouldn't really associate with metal do listen to metal behind the scenes, or not behind the scenes, but they listen to metal and they enjoy it. And it's nice to see that there's just metalheads all over the place, and all these celebrities that might do different things, they're all really into it. So, but you had also said too, you would come up with some, obviously we've done like a lot of celebrities that make movies, Stephen King being the writer, Steve-O being on Jackass and have his own thing. But you had also said about, you read up on some like sports figures like Mike Piazza and somebody else that was like, in the sports world that are metalheads.
Yeah, Piazza from the Mets. He's a big, I think, Metallica fan. He's a big, I think the 80s thrash metal scene. He's into that. So, yeah, not just celebrities on TV and movies, but sports celebrities, too. There's a lot of, sports guys that love heavy metal. Probably listen to metal to get all fired up before a game, because heavy metal's great for that. Gets you in a really good, positive, just go for it attitude. Nothing's going to stop me.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I've heard other, sports guys. I can't, pinpoint exactly who said it, but like you had said, there was some people that were just, everyone, all these athletes do have whatever music they're into to get them ready for a game. Minutes before the game in the locker room, they got their headphones on, they're listening to whatever they listen to get them fired up for the game. But there are a lot of popular pro sports athletes that are definitely metalheads as well. Like you said, like Piazza, who's retired, but he definitely played a long time in Major League Baseball. And then it was funny. Kind of came across this recently where Brian Slagle, who was from Metal Blade Records, he is a huge hockey fan. He made a list of like the top hockey players that are metalheads, and a couple that stood out to me, which I didn't know, were Jaromir Jagr. I think Jagr finally retired. Maybe he's not. He played a really long time with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and then he kind of bounced around after that as he got older. He played with the Rangers, but he was a huge, just superstar in the NHL. And Brian Slagle said that he was a huge metalhead, and he had also met Jaromir Jagr, being a hockey fan. Brian Slagle actually took him and met Metallica. And at the time, Metallica was making the Load album. They were in the studio making the Load album. And however they connected, Brian Slagle and Jaromir Jagr, they got together, and he found out that Jagr was a huge Metallica fan and took him over to the studio, because Brian Slagle knowing Metallica, obviously, and took him over to the studio, and Jagr got to hang out in the studio one day and watch them record and got to meet him and all that stuff. And there's another, Tuukka Rask is his name. He's a goalie for the Boston Bruins. Great goalie, been in the league a long time, and he's another huge metalhead as far as the NHL goes. So that was something that I came across. I didn't know that these famous hockey players, which I know there's got to be a lot more than that. Obviously there is, but those were two of the standouts, like superstars in hockey that are big metalheads.
See, I mean, it just goes to show you that metalheads come from everywhere. I mean, you can't like judge a metalhead by a look. There's plenty of people out there you would never, ever guess, they're big time into heavy metal. Even me now, I don't look like I used to when I was a teenager. When people find out I'm heavy metal, big time metalhead, like, really? Wow, you don't look like it. It's just funny how people picture metalheads, metal musicians, and even the fans as one and the same, long hair, black clothing, metal shirts. But anybody, it can come from anywhere. People can come up. Metal just touches people, and that becomes part of their life. Metal's not a fad. It's not something that you're into one summer, and then all of a sudden you're not into it no more. It's forever. And, that's what heavy metal is. It's like a lifestyle. It's with you till you're done.
Yeah, and I've had people say that too. It's like, diehard metalheads. They're like, there's other genres of music, not shitting on anything outside of metal. People love what they love. They're dedicated to what music they like, what type of music they like. But they've always said about metal, like, no, it's not just music. It's a lifestyle. It's in your blood. And it's so true. As you know, we know so many metalheads. We've been to so many shows. We know so many bands. We know band members. And it's always great to see that, because it's so true. It's like a brotherhood, men, women, all of it. It's all of that. And it's so true. And it's funny too, because we were joking around the other night with a friend, and we were talking about different types of metal. This was a friend that's not into metal at all. And we started talking about like, oh yeah, what's the difference? There's differences in metal. And we were laughing about like death metal and black metal. So he's like, well, describe what death metal is compared to black metal. So I kind of go into like a brief description of what makes those two different, because there's so many different genres of metal. And this guy's just making a joke, but he's like, man, I lost all respect for you, in a joking way. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, you listen to that crazy stuff? He goes, I look at you like you look like this normal person, and you look so, you're like a regular guy, and you're all cool, and you're chill, and you're a nice dude. You listen to this crazy black metal stuff? It was all a joke. But it's like, like you just said, though, it's with all these different types of celebrities, or all these different looks and types and things that they're associated with. You don't know who listens to metal and who doesn't. It's everyone's doing what they like to do, and they're into what they like. And it doesn't matter what they're doing outside of it.
Yeah, it doesn't you can't judge it on a look. Heavy metal's been around now for like almost 50 years. I think people fail to realize that. People that really ain't into it, so of course they're not going to realize that. But metal's been around for a long time. There's different generations, people in their 70s, 60s, 50s, young people today, which I think is to me, the most refreshing, awesome thing. There's still kids, teenagers, 20 years old that are discovering music that you and I,
Right.
Came across when it happened. Bam, bam, there it is. Hey, this is Rick and Lyle. We just got done discussing celebrities, TV and movie star celebrities that are into heavy metal, and like metal touches everybody, not just the regular person, celebrities too. Love it as well.
And that was your moment of metal. Be sure to rate and review us and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.